All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach J.K. McLeod, and we are kicking off a very quick Monday episode for you here, coming pretty much off the dome, jotted down a few notes because this is a topic that came up in a book that I'm currently re-listening to, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. So before getting into today's episode, where I'm going to share with you a snippet that I pulled about personal affirmations, I first, as always, want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I say it every time, and I mean it every time that I say it. I know without a shadow of a doubt that you have a lot of different content that you can consume. So I truly don't ever take it for granted every time that you press play to listen to the Help Me Understand podcast. So thank you for being here. I would appreciate it if you could hop onto whatever podcast platform you're listening to now and leave a rating and or review, a comment, a like, whatever the case may be. Even if you've left a previous review or a previous comment, I would love it if you would leave another one and let me know what you think about this particular episode. And beyond that, in addition, if you believe that this particular episode impacts someone or could provide some impact for someone that you know, be it a friend, family, coworker, somebody that you don't like that maybe just could use some help, whatever the case may be, I just ask that you forward this episode to them. So with that, let's get into takeaways that I had, or a quick takeaway that I had, which was really more of a re-engagement in an option for putting together an effective personal affirmation. And I purposely picked the verbiage here, again, off the top, not going with a script, picked the verbiage of an option because the way that really I could get a whole lot more marketing juice out of this is to start off with, you're doing our affirmations all wrong. That would be the way to actually start this off. And then it like grips you and gets you in. And maybe I'll hit that point one day, but today's not that day. So if you're not familiar with the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it is considered, I think, generally a classic within the personal development space, written a number of years ago by Stephen Covey, and currently in one of my coaching cohorts where I'm a client in this particular coaching cohort, we are going through a reread in our book club of this particular book. I've just been tuning in for the Audible version, although I do have the hard copy of it also. What I do like about this current version that we are reading, though, for those who might be interested in picking this book back up, if you haven't read it in quite some time, is it's the most current version, which also has some additional insight from his son. So I think that that's been pretty interesting to also get some of his insight in there too some years later. I know that the book was first introduced to me by my dad way back in the day, so it's just kind of cool to have this coming around. So in the current portion that we are in, Stephen Covey outlines 4 key components of what he calls an effective personal affirmation, which can also be referred to as a personal mission statement or a self-affirmation. And this comes up in the coaching space quite a bit, especially the coaching space that I'm involved in when it comes to overall fitness and sticking with habits. And you may also be aware that I co-own a apparel company called Feed Your Habits. So this speaks to like every part of me. I think habits are one of my love languages at this point. So there are 4 key components that Stephen Covey mentions in the book around the 4 basically pieces of an effective personal affirmation. And this was a great re-engagement and refocus point for me. So I want to share these with you also. So these are the 4 pieces. And then I'm going to give you some examples of how, based on this particular format, so I'm not going to try to sensationalize this by saying you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. I'm going to come from the aspect of, if you think that this particular format is something that would work for you, or you're not sure, like give it a shot, then I'll give you some examples of the correct way to do it based on this format and the incorrect way to do it based on this format. Some of these may be eye-opening. So key component number 1 is that the affirmation should be personal. So it should be written in first person where you're using I statements. Key component number 2, it should be positive. So it should describe what you want, not what you're avoiding. Key component number 3, it should be written in the present tense. So when you write that affirmation, you're phrasing it as if it's already happening, not something that you'll do someday. And then key component number 4, and I'll review these, it should be visual or emotional, like visual/emotional. So it should include some sort of visual or vivid imagery and a feeling so that it resonates emotionally and engages your imagination. So again, to review those 4, the 4 key components of an effective personal affirmation from Stephen Covey, author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It should be personal, it should be positive, it should be present tense, and it should be visual and or emotional. So here's an example, and I believe this was the example from the book that I copied. So I am confident and calm when I speak in front of others. I express my thoughts clearly and connect with my audience. So again, we've got personal, positive, present tense, and visual emotional. So I am confident and calm. So that's your personal when I speak in front of others. And I express my thoughts clearly and connect with my audience. So when in that particular statement, we say, I express my thoughts clearly, that is positive. So that covers the positive piece, and connect with my audience. So that is present tense, not when I'm going to do this speech. It's when I connect with my audience. And it also gives you the visual piece of you visualize talking to an audience. So again, personal, positive, present tense, and visual or emotional. And that was a quick example, but I actually jotted down 3 other affirmations that I basically just kind of crafted based on the target crowd that I typically work with, the psychographic that I typically work with, which generally tends to be busy adults who are working on building strength, they're improving their fitness, and really trying to stay consistent with overall what is generally termed healthy habits. And really, I call them like foundational fitness habits. Okay. So here are some affirmations that I wrote that I believe would be written in the correct format. Or actually, let me do this backwards. First, let me jot down a couple that I wrote that would be incorrect, again, based only on this particular format. So I'm not here to come for anybody. However, if you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. But anyways, I am somewhat kidding. All right, so here's an example, is an affirmation where you're writing, I won't skip my workouts anymore. And what would be wrong with that, or saying I don't skip workouts, is that it's framed in the negative, where you're focusing on what you don't do or what you don't want to do. So you're still putting energy into the negative, for this example, the negative behavior. So a better version would be something like, I show up consistently for my workouts because movement fuels my energy and focus, because that then focuses on identity and then positive behavior. Another example would be something like, I'm going to try to eat better starting next week. Okay. So what's wrong with that is that that's more vague. So it's not very specific, like eat better. What does that mean? It's also future oriented. So I'm going to try to eat better starting next week. That's next week. And it also lacks any sort of emotion or commitment. And I can't remember when I did this episode. I did an episode quite some time ago around using intentional language. And if I remember correctly, at the time, what really inspired that particular episode was following a particular content producer where I noticed that over and over, this particular individual was talking about, I hope that I'm going to, or I really want to, and then would insert certain things. And then lo and behold, some weeks later, the person would do some sort of a recap of here's what my month has been. And they would talk about all the things that they really wanted to do, but just didn't end up getting done. And it was coming through like loud and clear to me. That's because you're using non-committal language. So keep that in mind. So instead of saying something like, I'm going to try to eat better starting next week, from an affirmation standpoint, a better version would be something like, I choose meals that nourish my body and support my goals. I feel more energized and in control today. So that's something that's more present tense, it's intentional, and it's more emotionally connected and anchored. Okay, so those were my attempts at writing affirmations in the wrong way. So I'm also then going to finish out here with just 3 examples that I jotted down of affirmations that I believe would connect with an individual who, again, fits the majority of the psychographic that I work with, really focused again on building strength, getting stronger, improving their overall fitness, and really at the crux of it, staying consistent with those foundational fitness habits. Like that is the piece. So the first one is, I move my body with purpose and strength. I feel proud of showing up for myself, even on the hard days. So I think that this is one that works because it reinforces the identity as someone who follows through, even when it's tough. And that's something that's a very consistent piece that works for the crowd that I typically work with. And if you're listening to this podcast and tend to be a somewhat consistent follower, you likely would connect with that one. Another one is, I fuel my body with meals that give me energy, focus, and confidence. I feel strong knowing I'm in control of my choices. So that particular one really connects more with like connecting the nutrition to the actual emotional benefits that you get from taking care of yourself, like confidence and control. And it's not only centered around physical appearance. And then the last one that I jotted down that I believe would be a fitness focused affirmation for yourself would be, I rest and recover without guilt because I know it makes me better. I wake up clear-headed and ready to train, lead, and live fully. So that particular one, I really like that one specifically because sometimes I've been very transparent about this over a number of years. Sometimes those rest days, which I've now reframed those number of years ago as recharge days, it took me a while, especially before I really understood fitness and especially muscle building and the way muscle building truly works. It took me a while to really come around to understand that like not taking rest days until it felt like I quote unquote needed a rest day was just not really the move. So I really enjoyed this particular affirmation because it addresses that common struggle of overworking and under recovering and moves it into more of an empowering mindset shift with talking about, I rest and recover without guilt because I know it makes me better. And then also speaking to the benefit where it's, I wake up clear-headed and ready to train, lead, and live fully. So you're recharging. And that's a reframe that I've used for a number of years for myself and with clients, and I will continue to do, is reframing those rest days as recharge days. Like think about it as you are recharging the battery. And very common analogy or comparison that's made is that you wouldn't let your phone get down to 0% before charging it. So why are you letting yourself do that? And then that opens up a whole nother additional podcast episode where you might be living at charging your battery only charging your battery to maybe 50%, and you've been living at 50% battery and you think that's cool. Maybe I could go off into that tangent some other time. But yeah, I just wanted to take a few minutes here and just express my perspective or share my perspective with you on this little snippet that came up in our book read today that just really hit for me. So again, just to recap here, if you are planning to utilize this particular exercise on self-affirmations, the 4 key components would be to make sure that it's personal, make sure that it's positive, make sure that it addresses present tense, and make sure that there is a visual or emotional component to it. So if you would like to be a part of a community that encourages focusing on things like this, like affirmations and following through with commitments and staying consistent, then I would like to formally invite you to join the Fitness Foundations community. The way that you can join this free community, yes, Free, free, not free 99, it's free community, is simply by shooting me a DM on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod, or you can email me, jk@jkmcleod.com. Basically, you're going to know my name either way. So you can reach out to me. All I need is your email address and I will send that link directly to you. Something that I did think about is, man, should you remove any friction where somebody has to reach out to you in order to get the email to then send to them? And that's really a big focus a lot of times in the business that I'm in, is remove the friction to get people started. And I will tell you that as of right now, the reason that I have not just made it a link where you just join from the link is because I want to, one, make sure that I'm not getting a whole bunch of bots or anything like that. Like, things are getting kind of wild these days with bots on the internet. So that is number one. And number two, as of right now, it allows me to very transparently, I have your email address. So if there's something that I want to be able to reach out to you directly to make sure that I can follow up. So for example, one of the requirements, or the only requirement, to get started is that when you get into the group, you have to make a post in the Who We Are section. You'll understand when you get into the community, there's a Who We Are channel. And all that you are required to do is make a post to introduce yourself. As of right now, that is the only requirement that keeps this thing totally free for you. So what we will be starting very shortly is, if you've been in the community for an X amount of time and have yet to introduce yourself, I would like to be able to reach out to you to say, hey, wanted to follow up, make sure everything was all good. And the reason for that is because I believe that communities, especially communities like this that are focused on foundational fitness habits, also have some level of accountability to them. I am certainly not the 1, 2, or 3 who is going to consistently hound someone, especially in a free community. Howbeit, I am a big proponent of people participating when they're in a community and not just standing on the wall or sitting on the wall, however that goes. So there you go. All right. So with that, thank you for listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I truly appreciate it. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.